Oh, let's see.
गणपति बापा मोरिया।
You're muted, Panna.
That's it. Sarvana Jai Shri Krishna. Good evening to all. Namaste, Jai Chirendra, Jai Swami Narayan, Sai Ram. A very warm welcome from Women to Women. Once again, we meet with Caroline and Daxa to help you out. And today's subject is on menopause and cancer. This is because of request of you guys. So we've been taking different avenues according to what you are asking for. So I'm going to start off with Omkara and then hand it over to Caroline. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurbhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. A very warm welcome to the new joiners, and I would urge you to please put your videos on so we know who we're talking to. We don't want to talk to blank screens. We really would like to see your faces. So I would appreciate for you to put your videos on. And we will have Q&As. So if you have any questions, put it down in our chat group, and Daxa and I will pick it up, and Caroline will answer them for you, and Daksha will answer them for you if possible. Otherwise, we're going to continue with the subjects you guys have requested, which is menopause and cancer. So can I hand over to Caroline, please?
Well, thank you very much, Panna. And I'll just reiterate, it is nice to be able to see the faces of people, and please do ask your questions. I'm going to try and share my screen now to get some slides up. There we go. Hopefully you can all see my screen now. Is that okay? Can everybody see them? Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so just for the new people, we call this sort of series Real Food for Better Health, because really what it's all about is eating as healthily as we can to nourish our bodies, to keep us healthy, and therefore to help with crises that might come along, but particularly to prevent as many as possible from coming along. So really, there isn't anything mind-blowing I've got to tell you tonight, but I will go over some of the basics, which will not only help the people who are new to the group, but also reiterate that it's all about getting your food right that helps the conditions that you've asked me to discuss today. But before I go any further, I do like to point out that although I'm a retired nurse, I'm speaking to you today really as a Public Health Collaboration Ambassador. That's an organisation that was formed, it's a charity, and it was formed some years ago because the founders, who are mostly doctors, pharmacists, nutritionists, psychologists, health professionals of different types, got together because they felt that the current guidelines that the government give out, and a lot of the health advice that's given out at the moment, is not helping people. And we really wanted to have people better informed about how important nutrition is in our everyday health. So Daxa and I are both ambassadors for the Public Health Collaboration, and we speak to you in that capacity, not as individuals giving you individual medical advice. So if you are going to make any major changes to the way you eat and your lifestyle, and you are on medication from your doctors, please do discuss with your GPs or practice nurses before you make any major changes. They may need to monitor you, and they may need to alter your medication. Our aim is for a lot of people perhaps to not need the medications they're on if they can substantially change the way they eat and other aspects of their lifestyle. But as I say, I'm not here tonight to give you individual medical advice. So I was asked at the end of the last meeting to talk about food and cancer, or to talk about cancer tonight. There isn't a massive amount at the moment out there of proof that what we eat affects cancer. There's a growing body of evidence now that it is important, and there's a lot of research, I think, now getting underway looking at how different diets can affect those who have already got cancer. But we know that the healthier we keep ourselves, the less chance we've got of developing cancer. And certainly it's well recognised now that if people are seriously overweight or obese, that definitely increases their chances of cancer. And there's lots of studies looking at different aspects of food, some of which have been disproven, but others that show that certain, or the absence of certain foods, but perhaps as well as eating too much of the wrong foods, can make us more vulnerable. So really the bottom line on cancer is that the healthier you keep yourself, the better the chance you have of not getting cancer in the first place. But there is, as I say now, a lot of interest in how cancer thrives in the body and what it needs to be successful, if you like, because I mean, cancer is a parasite, basically, when cells go berserk and they start taking all the nutrients from the body to the detriment of the host. And there is quite a lot of evidence starting to grow that a ketogenic diet, now that's a diet that's exceptionally low in carbohydrates, where the person's body really learns to run on fat rather than on sugar, that kind of diet can be successful in stopping the spread of cancer, reducing the size of tumours, and generally having a better outcome. Now, these are all early stage trials and working sort of research projects. And I would never encourage anybody to go against their doctor's medical advice if they've already got cancer. But if you're eating highly nutritious food, but erring on the side of being ketogenic, it won't do you any harm. And there is certainly plenty of evidence to show that it may well help. And there have been successful sort of programs where people have had a lot of success dealing with brain, breast, lung, and prostate cancers. And now whether some of this is purely because the person is eating so much better, they're eating more nutritious food, that's helping their bodies to fight. But there is actually quite a lot of work to show that cancer cells love sugar. So if we deprive them of a supply of sugar, they can't thrive. And I've just received a book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, and I'll wave it at the camera when I finish the talk. Looking back over history, this is very much a similar story to the sugar story, where scientists realized that sugar was harmful for us way back, but people with louder voices and with better vested interests managed to outshout them, and therefore sugar got pushed to the side and fat was the enemy, and fat was the thing that was doing us all the harm. People are now recognizing that this wasn't true and that actually sugar is very detrimental. And similarly, there was early work done by a chap called Otto Warburg back in the early part of the 20th century, clearly demonstrating that cancer cells thrive on sugar. And his work was progressing really well until the Second World War. And then really after the Second World War, drug companies and pharmaceutical companies and all sorts of other vested interests started researching cancer, and drugs became the main therapy. And the idea of diet, something as simple as your diet helping, was really pushed to one side. But it's re-emerging now. So I can tell you more in a few weeks' time when I've read the book, but it follows very much a similar line to Dr. Jason Fung, who is a modern physician, who's a Canadian physician who does a lot of work on ketogenic and fasting and other ways of looking after chronic diseases with diet. And he's also written a recent book called The Cancer Code. And he similarly feels that modern foods and ultra processed foods make the problem worse because they're feeding the cancer cells. So this is work that's in the early stage, but you can do yourself no harm at all by reducing carbohydrates and trying, if possible, to get towards the ketogenic end of the spectrum. And that will help your body not only to thrive, but if it does come across errant cells, for them to have less chance of succeeding and taking over. So food and nutrition and cancer is a fairly new but growing, and hopefully in the next few years we'll have an awful lot more positive evidence that will help the mainstream medics to take it more seriously. At the moment, it's a little bit of the luck of the draw as to who you're being treated by, as to whether they give any credibility to the idea of nutrition helping. But it can never, ever be to your detriment to be eating a very healthy, nutritious diet. So that's the bottom line, really. The other thing I was asked, sort of these things got lobbed in at the end of the last meeting, was the menopause. And I didn't really get a chance to find out what the people who suggested it really wanted. But obviously the menopause, as we are pretty much all women, I think, on the line tonight, it's something that if it hasn't already affected you, it's going to, unfortunately. And it's a period of life in a woman's life that can vary hugely from person to person, in as much as for some people they sail through it, for other people it lasts for years and years and years and the whole period is miserable. For others, they have ups and downs, so it's very, very different. But at the end of the day, what's happening to all of us is that our ovaries are starting to wind down, if you like. I do remember a gynecologist once saying to me that really women weren't actually meant to live much beyond the menopause, because our role, if you take it back to basic nature, our role is to produce. And once we've finished our childbearing years, then we have no purpose. I think we can argue about that, but sort of biologically, that's the way our bodies have kind of been designed. So the menopause, back in the day when women didn't live perhaps much beyond 65, the menopause and the postmenopausal phase of our lives wasn't that long. But of course now we hope to have many, many decades left post-menopause. So not only do we want to know how to keep ourselves healthy through the menopause, but we want to be sure that we're very healthy once we reach the postmenopausal stage as well. And again, there's no magic secret to this. It is very much all about our lifestyle, other aspects, not just nutrition, that I'll come back to later, but eating a very healthy, nutritious life that supports our bodies while it's going through all these changes and takes one of the stresses away. Because if we're not eating properly, not only do we have the stress of how we feel and other things that are going on in our life during the menopause, but if we're not eating properly, that's an extra stress on our body because it isn't getting the right nutrients to maintain itself and to cope with the additional problems that menopause throws at us. So I think it's really important that we understand that children need a healthy diet to grow and thrive. Young adults need the healthy nutrition to be able to thrive and obviously reproduce healthily. And then at the later stages, now that we do manage to live much longer than our previous generations, we want to maintain that health throughout. And it really does come down to simple matters like how our bodies are meant to function, which is having nutrient density in the food that we have, not too much food, well spaced out meals, but nutrient dense, along with exercise that the body is meant to have. So we're not meant to sit and watch the telly, we're not meant to sit at a desk all day, we're meant to be mobile for a huge part of our waking hours, and then we're meant to sleep for significant lengths of time. And if we can get these elements back into our lifestyle, a lot of the modern problems wouldn't be as bad as they are. So really what I've got to tell you tonight is not an awful lot different to what I've been telling those that have been coming regularly. But for those that are new, we will go through some of the basics again. Oops, sorry, this is jumping around all over the place. So just to sort of mention a bit more about the menopause before I go on to the nutrition bit. Most of us, sadly, who've been through the menopause, those of you that might be approaching it, we do start to notice some changes in our bodies, the redistribution of fat. Women are meant to carry fat around the hips and thighs, much as we hate it. That's the way our bodies are often designed, and it's all to do with our childbearing potential, etc. But as we hit the menopause or the perimenopausal period, we start to notice that we've got much more of a predisposition to have that fat hanging around our tummies, which none of us like, especially if our muscles are still wrecked from carrying babies, etc. So the belly fat goes. Now, when belly fat lands around our middle, it has got a great association with causing problems with insulin resistance. And I'll come back to remind you about insulin resistance in a minute. So it does make it easier for us then to put on weight. And it also can cause us to be hungrier because a greater amount of insulin. Insulin is a fat storing hormone. So if we've got high levels of insulin, we're wanting to eat to put on fat. Well, we're not psychologically wanting to, but our bodies are being driven to do that. So we're up against that particular battle. So we're hungrier, and also high insulin levels can encourage us to retain fluid. So some of the weight that we kind of feel that we put on around the menopause is often fluid retention as well as belly fat. So of course, none of this helps our mood. Our fluctuating hormones also have us going through all sorts of roller coasters of emotions as well. And that's why it can be such a miserable time. So why low carb in terms of dealing with all of these problems? In previous weeks, we've discussed carbohydrates and the potential for that to make you more vulnerable to type 2 diabetes. But as we've also discussed, having high levels of blood sugar, which mean you produce lots of insulin, and then eventually the body becomes very resistant to that insulin, means we keep a lot of insulin and sugar floating around in our blood, and this affects every organ in the body, and therefore lots of modern chronic diseases can be tracked back to a high insulin level, which has been brought about because of an incorrect diet. So these will have a great effect on things like the menopause. So normal life events can be made worse by this inflammatory process that's going on because of the poor diet. So everything really does come back to that nutrition and having the basic nutrition right. So we say low carb because carbohydrate, of the 3 macronutrients, we've got carbohydrate, protein and fat. Of those 3, carbohydrate is totally and utterly unnecessary for life. You will naturally get carbohydrates from vegetables and some of your other foods, that particularly if you're vegetarian, that you'll eat. We do not need to be adding carbohydrates at all. It'll come naturally, but also the body can function very, very efficiently running on fat, and it can actually manufacture glucose because the brain needs a certain amount of glucose. The rest of our body can function with the energy that we get from fat. So carbohydrates are absolutely unnecessary to thrive, whereas protein and fat are essential. Protein are the building blocks of the body, the molecules that help every muscle, every body tissue to grow and repair and thrive. And fat is also a very important energy source, but also contains many fat-soluble vitamins that we simply can't get from any other source. So we cannot live without protein and fat, but we can live without carbohydrates. So restricting carbohydrate means that we have to focus on our diet much more on the protein and fat that is important for us. And also they're more satiating, so we don't overeat. The trouble with carbohydrates is, particularly manufactured carbohydrates, is they're very moreish, but also because they drive insulin, they produce insulin, which does, if it's still getting a response from the body, will clear the sugar from the blood, and then you'll be hungry again, and you get these awful cycles of high blood sugar, high insulin, low blood sugar, hunger, and off you go again with the same cycle. Don't get these awful roller coaster effects when you're eating protein and fat. So, and they're much more nutritious for the body as well. Now, when I'm talking about the cancer particularly, but also some of the successful management of menopause with diet, they're really looking at ketogenic diets rather than low carb. And the difference is that low carb is classified as having a daily intake of less than 130 grams of carbohydrate per day. We actually recommend that if you want to lose weight on a low carb program, you really need to be dropping your carbs to less than 100 grams. And to be honest, a lot of us struggle unless we get it down to around 50 grams. But a ketogenic diet would normally require you to have a carb intake of less than 30 grams. Some people can get away with 50. Others need to drop right down to 20 grams a day. And to become ketogenic, what we're really meaning is that you've stopped burning sugar and you are now using your body fat for your energy. So little substances called ketones will be manufactured as a process of living that way, and they can be found in blood and in urine, and people can test them, and in breath indeed. So there are different ways that people can measure them if they really want to go that far and measure them. But in order to start burning body fat, you've really got to get your carbs right down. So that's good news in the sense that these ketogenic diets have been found to be very successful at managing not only cancer in some situations and menopausal symptoms, but also epilepsy. There's been a lot of good work showing that children, particularly with very severe epilepsy, see great improvements when they're on a ketogenic diet, but that really does require getting carbs down to very low levels. And the reason I'm slightly sort of hesitant here is that I know a lot of you are vegetarian and some of you are vegan, and it becomes much more difficult if you're vegan to get your carbs down that low and maintain adequate amounts of protein. And I'll explain that again later. So there is good news here, but it's quite hard if you are vegetarian and really hard if you're vegan to get down that low. But you can still lose weight because you can still, you know, drop your carbs quite significantly with slight alterations to the way you eat. So as I say, there are some studies that show that many women have found that their symptoms do improve if they go onto a ketogenic diet. But what is really, really vital is keeping protein to a healthy level. Now, the current UK guidance, which not only tells you to eat far too many carbs, also has a rather low level of adequate protein. They often talk around 50 to 70 grams of protein for most adults. Most people who feel that, you know, that's wrong and that our approach to diet is very wrong in the sort of mainstream medical world, feel that we should be looking at 1.2 to 2 grams of protein for every kilogram of desired body weight. So that means if you are a woman who feels that 60 kilograms, which I think is about 9.5 stone, would be your ideal weight, then you really need to be eating between 72 and 120 grams of protein per day. And that's a real challenge for a vegan, and I'll show you some protein charts in a bit. But you've certainly got to try and make sure you are getting adequate protein. The reason I say it's a challenge for a vegan is that you can get that protein through very healthy foods, but those foods tend to have quite a lot of carbohydrates as well. So it's quite hard to get the adequate protein and the low levels of carbohydrate if you're vegan. So I just want to throw that in there. Don't want to mislead anybody that it's a doddle to do. But other lifestyle issues that we know can affect the menopause, or the menopause can affect, it can become a vicious circle. But stress, and I've spoken about this in previous weeks, stress is a modern phenomenon, chronic stress. Many of us are, you know, just trying to be all things to all men and women, and we've got busy work lives, busy home lives, maybe financial issues. We've all had the pandemic to cope with, and chronic stress is really bad for us, and it's absolutely going to exacerbate menopausal symptoms. So we need to recognize that stress is bad for us. A little bit of acute stress is fine. We need that occasional run for the bus, or a sudden sort of fright that very quickly subsides and everything's all right again. That kind of keeps the body pepped up. But when stress is ongoing day after day after day, it has a very detrimental effect on our physiology, and certainly can affect not only our sleep, but our ability to lose weight, because you get a lot of the hormone cortisol produced when you're under chronic stress, and that inhibits weight loss, and, you know, it has a very negative effect on us. So trying to find ways of managing stress is really important. Exercise is also something that, again, some of us find we claim we're too busy to exercise, but you know, we have to respect this body of ours, and we have to prioritize looking after it. And we really do need to build into our day time for exercise. Now, good brisk walking is one of the best things you can do, and getting out into the fresh air, particularly in the morning if you can manage it, is also really, really valuable. But sometimes, a couple of times in the week, 2-3 times if you manage it, some resistance training. And this can be done at home. It can be done with you know, things that you have in your kitchen, but anything that puts your muscles through a bit of a workout, arms and legs. So simple squats for the legs, lifting things that are a little bit heavy. So it could be tins of food, or it could be some plastic milk cartons filled with water that form a weight that you lift above your head and you lift from, to the side, and do various exercises with. There's lots and lots of great videos on YouTube now showing you how to do simple resistance exercises at home. But as we get older, these resistance exercises are incredibly important for keeping our muscle mass and also strengthening the muscles and the ligaments around joints, and that will protect your joints as you get older. But keeping good muscle mass, which we naturally will lose if we don't work at it as we get older, is not only great for health, it is also very helpful for our mental health, but also the better toned you are, the more efficient you are at utilizing the energy that you take in your food, and therefore it will have a complementary effect on weight loss. We don't like to encourage people to think that if they exercise a lot, they can eat rubbish and still lose weight. You can never outdo a bad diet with exercise, but exercise is important in its own right as part of health. And exercise can lead on then to helping with the next element. So not only can the exercise that's in the middle there help with the stress above, but it can help with the sleep below, as can activities such as yoga, meditation, journaling, which I've talked about in previous weeks. There's a great deal of research now showing that if people just do a simple little bit of journaling, which is basically making notes in the morning or the evening, you can have a scrappy old notebook, or you can have a very fancy book that's bought for the purpose. But really in the morning and in the evening, thinking about what you've got to be grateful for and focusing on the positives in your life rather than all the bad stuff. That can be really beneficial to your mental health, but also your physical health. And doing it at night can help with sleep. Doing it in the morning can help you have a positive attitude to the day as it starts. So those kind of things can help with sleep, as can keeping all the electronics away from the bedroom. So not watching TV in bed, not having the computer screen or the phone screen visible to you when you're trying to get to sleep, because these things are distracting and they also send the wrong signals to your brain and can make it much harder to get to sleep or stay asleep. So really addressing and giving priority to sleep, not thinking that, well, I can function on 6 hours, so I'll carry on working late into the evening, or I'll carry on watching the telly till midnight. We really need to prioritize sleep, because sleep has a very positive effect on our physical health. And if our physical health's in good shape, that helps our mental health. And it works then in tandem with a healthy diet. So all of these things are as important, and they are never more important than when we're going through the menopause. Sleep can be disturbed by hot flushes, but again, some of the evidence shows that ketogenic diets can help reduce those slightly, but again, everybody's different, so I'm not making rash promises here. It's in its early stages of research, but the healthier you are, the less these things will impact you. So just to really refresh those of you that have been on the group before, but also to introduce for the new people why when we talk about sugar and carbohydrates, they are one and the same thing, because basically any carbohydrate is basically just a lot of sugar molecules joined together. So simple sugar is one molecule, glucose is monosaccharide, sucrose, which is another form of sugar that you find in many foods, is two molecules joined together, it's a disaccharide. And then you get polysaccharides, which make up many of the carbohydrate type foods, wheat and rice and so forth. And they are lots of molecules of sugar joined together. The bottom line here is that when our digestive system gets hold of these foods, they all end up as sugar. So when we talk about reducing your sugar intake, your carbohydrate intake, we are talking about all carbohydrates, because they all end up as sugar. There is no such thing as a good carbohydrate in the sense that it doesn't contain sugar. There are some that are more slowly digested, that are less detrimental to you, but they basically all end up as sugar. And I think that's a really important point to get hold of, because we get lots of people saying, well, what about this? What about that? If it's a carbohydrate, it will end up as sugar. And as I've said, carbohydrate is not essential to life. And it's interesting that in natural foods, you never ever get carbohydrate and fat together. There's a couple of exceptions, such as the coconut and things like an avocado, but they are very healthy foods. But you'll generally never get that combination of carbohydrate and fat that the food industry has discovered is so delicious and moreish, and we want to eat lots and lots of it. So no wonder they've capitalized on that. But Mother Nature is much, much more sensible, and she put together animal-based foods that contain fat and protein, or plant-based foods that contain carbohydrate and protein, but never the fat and the carbohydrate together, the two energy sources together. And we really do need, I think, to go back very often and look at what Mother Nature has done, because it's the man-made stuff that's really doing so much of the harm. So we need to try and base our daily intake on the natural foods rather than the manufactured foods. And the problem is out there in the world now, if you go into shops and particularly supermarkets, there are just walls and walls and walls of food in which there are hidden sugars. So there are the obvious ones, the cakes, biscuits and sweets, but there's all the other stuff here, the iceberg that's below the water here. All of these things ultimately end up as sugar. So just have a look at the tropical fruits there. A lot of people think because fruit is, grows, it's natural, it's healthy, and in very small amounts it may well be, but it is basically nature's candy. So the 5 a day myth, which is a myth because there's no science behind it, it's a number that was plucked out of the air, and unfortunately instead of saying have 5 portions of vegetables, which wouldn't be bad advice, they said fruit and veg. So people that don't like vegetables think, well, if I have 5 pieces of fruit, that's great, but they're having 5 lots of high sugar food that doesn't necessarily have that much in the way of nutrients. Fruit doesn't actually carry as many nutrients as vegetables do, so it's not the healthiest thing to be eating lots of, especially if it's in place of good healthy vegetables or other protein sources. So there's an awful lot of hidden sugars in our modern diets. And the manufacturers have wonderful ways of disguising it as well. And all of the names on here are basically sugar. And yet any of these names could turn up on a label, on a can or a packet, or a manufactured product, ice cream, whatever. Anything you pull out of a supermarket freezer, unless it's just frozen veg, it's going to have a list of ingredients, and there probably will be sugar. Even in savoury foods, there will probably be some of these forms of sugar. They put them in to make them tasty. They put them in, sugar goes in anything where fat has been removed. So something that's got a big banner saying, pretending it's healthy because it's low fat, will probably be full of sugar. So we need to be very savvy when we're looking at product labels. The other thing that we like people to sort of be conscious of is when they're eating food, is it actually going to do me any good? And also, I'm about to eat something. Am I eating that just because I'm bored? Am I eating it because I'm sad and miserable? Or am I eating it because I am genuinely hungry? Because in modern life, we do have 3 different types of hunger. We have the nutrient hunger, which is when we're genuinely hungry and our body's telling us we need nutrients, so please eat some, and it's not going to be happy with us. We eat that donut because that's not nutritious. So not long after we've eaten that donut, we'll either feel sick or feel hungry again, and we'll want to eat again. And if we replace it with yet another bit of manufactured food, we're going to keep wanting to eat because our body is not yet satisfied. But also we may be eating those things purely for the pleasure of the bliss point, that moment when, oh, that feels nice, that tastes nice, but it's very soon gone, and then we're craving more. So we do eat a lot for pleasure these days. Our ancestors didn't have that luxury, they were lucky to get enough food to survive, and they ate purely for nutrition. But now we often eat purely because the food is there, and we don't necessarily feel hungry, but we eat it. So we've really got to get back to thinking about, why am I eating, and what am I eating? And that vegetable curry there contains much less in the way of carbohydrates, similar amount of energy, more protein, and the fat that's in that vegetable curry, hopefully if it's been made with naturally occurring fats rather than refined oils, the fats in there will be much more nutritious. It's got a lot more fibre in it as well, which will suit our gut. So it's generally a much better and healthier meal, even though it's giving us a similar amount of energy, but it's giving us lots of nutrients as well as that empty energy. So again, looking at grams of carbohydrate, you can see that you can get an awful lot more healthy stuff for your 20 grams than if you're eating the beige white carbs that we're encouraging you to avoid now. Bread, pasta, rice, white potatoes, lots of carbohydrate, very little in the way of nutrients, whereas you're getting a lot more and much more nutritious food in the pictures on the right there. So it's getting to know which foods are going to give you lots of nutrition and energy, rather than ones that will just temporarily give you some satisfaction, but actually not giving your body any rewards at all. You're getting no nutritive value. Now, these infographics are available on the Public Health Collaboration's website, and they were designed by one of the GPs who's sort of one of our forerunners in this way of approaching lifestyle. And he felt when he was talking to his patients about food, it was easier to show them sort of representation of typical foods and how much sugar was in them. And just please note that the cereals, apart from the porridge at the bottom, they're all 30-gram portions. Now, 30 grams of these cereals in the bottom of a bowl is nothing, and none of us would eat just 30 grams of cornflakes. We're bound to have at least twice, but probably more likely 3 times as much. So just in that 30 grams, you'd be getting the equivalent of 8 teaspoons of sugar. Oops, sorry, things come alive. So in all reality, somebody having a bowl of cornflakes in the morning is probably having something nearer to 24 teaspoons of sugar. Now, yeah, that is a huge amount of sugar. And that's before you've started any other meals, snacks, whatever. And this is why we've got the problem we've got, is that people are using an awful lot of these foods, are driving their blood sugars high, encouraging insulin to be released, which, if you're still sensitive to it, clears away the blood sugar, and then an hour later you're hungry again. It doesn't satisfy you, it doesn't do your body any good. And if you go on like that for too long, eventually the insulin isn't able to do its job because the body becomes resistant to it. So it's really important to be aware that carbohydrates are not meant to be eaten in those sort of proportions. This one looks at some of the other basics, and there's the bad news for you folks. Basmati rice, it doesn't actually matter which rice it is, they're all very high in carbohydrates. And also this great myth about whole grains. Brown rice, brown bread, brown pasta, white pasta, they are all as bad as each other. They all break down to sugar in the end, and they have just as much, whether it's a white rice or brown rice. Might take marginally longer to be digested, but not much, and the end result is the same. So we really do need to be aware that carbohydrates are something that we should be having in very small amounts as opposed to the main event. Fruit, as I mentioned, is not the great healthy phenomenon that many of us are led to believe. An average banana has nearly 6 teaspoons of sugar in it, and yet they're often heralded as the great healthy snack. They do terrible things to diabetics' blood sugars. Grapes, 4 teaspoons in a 120 gram size. The trouble is it's very easy to eat loads of grapes because they're very sweet. And of course, that's the other problem. Modern fruit has been bred to be extremely sweet. So we eat more of it because it's easier to eat. But unfortunately, it's doing us even more harm. So the fruit that we recommend are the berries. Strawberries are probably the most carby, but they're not bad at all. Blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, all the things that are currently quite widely available in the UK, they are all really healthy fruits because there's a lot of fibre per gram, and therefore the sugar hit from those is minimal. So we would highly encourage you to eat the berries, but not all these other sweeter tropical fruits. Now, as I mentioned earlier, protein is really essential for all through life. I say for children, they need lots of it because they're growing. As we mature, we don't need as much. However, we have got bodies that have to be constantly maintained. Most people look after their car better than they do look after their bodies. You know, it has regular servicing and MOTs and all the rest of it. You wouldn't dream of putting the wrong fuel or the wrong oil in your car, but we are constantly doing that to our bodies. So we need protein, and we need healthy protein. So unfortunately, for those that are vegetarian or vegans, the easiest source of protein is from animal sources. So you have to work a lot harder when you don't eat animal sources of protein to get adequate amounts each day. So obviously, if you're a vegetarian that eats dairy and eggs, that's a really, really good source. And tofu and so forth suits both vegans and those that eat the dairy products. And again, for both, nuts and seeds can be a good substitution for the protein that meat eaters get from their animal sources. But you do need to watch your nuts particularly, because some nuts have got a much higher carb content than others. Now, all packaging has nutritional labels on them now, and you should get used to checking the carb content, and do look at the total carbs, not just the bit they've broken down to sugar, because they like to fool you, manufacturers, by making something look healthier than it is, by giving you one reading for carbohydrate, another of which is sugars, as if it's only the sugars that are important. The whole carbohydrate is an issue. So almonds, walnuts, pecans, macadamia nuts are all very good in that they're good protein, but they're also lower in carb. Dark chocolate's also been found to be very, have quite a lot of good health-giving properties. It's actually very hard to overeat on dark chocolate. Now, obviously, there are vegan versions out there now, but we do say it needs to be 85% cocoa solids or higher. Otherwise, again, the carb content is going to be detrimental. But we do need to work hard at looking at your total protein intake. Chia seeds are actually extremely good in terms of the amount of protein that they produce, or that they contain, and they're also very good on the kind of soluble fibre that's extremely good for our gut and our microbiome, which is becoming increasingly understood, and we realise now how important it is to feed our microbiome and keep it healthy. So soluble fibre from the likes of chia seeds is very useful, as well as the protein content of those seeds, and they can be added to breads, either ground up or just added as they are. Chia gel can be used in place of eggs sometimes, in baking. So there's lots of uses for chia seeds, and they are much more readily available now than they used to be. So that can be a very useful source. Let's say if you're a vegetarian that eats dairy, then go for the full fat versions, never ever the low fat. Any low fat products will have ended up having other substances added to improve the flavour, because once the fat's taken away, you're losing most of the flavour of those products. So please go for the best quality and full fat versions of any dairy products that you would use. Wherever possible, buy the best you can, and if you can get grass-fed butter and free range products, so much the better. But eating real food, no matter where it's come from, is always going to be better than eating manufactured food. Eggs are great in terms of proteins, about 7 grams of protein in every egg, and you can eat as many eggs as you like. It's no longer the issue that eggs cause huge problems with cholesterol and heart problems. Dietary cholesterol does not play a part in heart disease. It's too complex. I did a session a few sessions ago on cholesterol. It's a complete myth that the fat that we eat, and particularly things like eggs, just get digested and suddenly clog up our arteries. It's much more complex than that. And in fact, the inflammation caused by these high insulin levels and high sugar levels that we've been talking about are what does the damage that causes the blockages in many of the blood vessels. So please don't be frightened of eating healthy animal fats if you aren't vegetarian, or plant-sourced healthy fats such as olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil. Please do not have what they call vegetable oil or seed oils, sunflower seed oils, those sort of oils that have been manufactured through industrial processes, they are really bad for us. They cause a lot of inflammation, a lot of problems. So go for your natural oils. So if you do eat dairy, ghee is a great oil, a great fat to use for cooking. But if you're vegan, then go for the olive, avocado, coconut oils. And as I said, eat small amounts of fruit. Nuts are going to be a really important source of protein, particularly for the vegans, as are pulses. But again, be aware of their carb content. Some are better than others. And please, when it comes to fruit, always eat your fruit, don't drink it. If you are drinking a smoothie or fruit juice that's been prepared by squeezing dozens of oranges, you're having the equivalent of maybe 10 oranges, but without the fiber. And that is just like drinking a can of Coke. It's got as much sugar in it as a can of Coke would have. And it's just going straight into your system and causing a rise in your blood sugar. It's not doing you any good at all. Even the fruit juice with bits in, it's been blitzed. So low carb on vegan, realistically, it's really hard to eat less than 100 grams of carbs a day, I would say, as a vegan. You've got to work very hard at finding the lowest carb protein sources you can. So don't, beat yourself up, but you have to be realistic and do your research and find those foods that you like that have the lowest carb content. Lentils and chickpeas are 50% carbs. So try to, maybe have those as a feature in a meal, but not the main bit. Try and use more of the leafy vegetables. Any of the vegetables that grow above the ground are going to be very low in carbs. Root vegetables, because they are the root that nurtures the plant, will be higher in carbs. So we're not saying don't eat them, but be aware that they will have more carbs. So try and have a really good mixture and have more of the leafy veg, and keep the higher carb content foods to the smaller amounts. There are quite a lot of beans that are very useful, that have a lower carb content, but also have protein. So this is just again to give you a bit of an example. On the right, you've got your beans and pulses. Half a cup of black lentils will give you about 12 grams of protein. But unfortunately, this chart doesn't tell you how many carbs are in there as well. So you've got to be aware there will be carbs. But you've got quite a few beans that are a really useful source of protein. Over here, obviously ignore the meat bit, but you've got eggs, 7.5 grams per egg of protein. So that's a really good source. Something like halloumi cheese per 100 grams, 22 grams. So halloumi is becoming very popular and very readily available and quite versatile. So if you do eat dairy, then that can be a very useful source. You don't have to have too much halloumi to be getting well onto your target of protein per day. And obviously things like cheddar cheese and so forth. When it came to foods that were really good for the menopause, oily fish came up as one of the key foods. Obviously, if you're vegetarian, that's not going to be for you. Linseed was another very useful food that can be added. You can grind linseeds to add into bread mixes. You can add them to yogurt as part of breakfast. Some of the low carb granola recipes that we make have linseed in them. So there's foods like linseed that can be very useful for general health, but also particularly good for the menopause, that can be added to other dishes to help increase our intake of those. Green tea was also mentioned as something that's very useful for symptoms of menopause. But protein, really, really important and incredibly important to work at, as I say, on a vegetarian or vegan diet. So just avoid all processed foods. The reason for that being that they usually include lots of additives, many of which are manufactured and industrialized seed oils, chemicals, things that are just really bad for our bodies. So if you're picking up a package or a tin or a pot in the chiller section, look at the ingredients. If there are more than 5 of them, be wary. And if the second ingredient is sugar, or even if it features in one of the first 3 ingredients, put it back. Do as much home cooking as you can, and I know many of you do, but it might be just that you need to start thinking about changing slightly what you use. So if you do have sunflower oil in your kitchen, I would plead with you to get rid of it and replace it with good quality cold pressed oils. So be careful with olive oil, because there are a lot of olive oils now on the shelf that are made from partially refined. They aren't necessarily virgin olive oils. So you want the cold pressed oils, not the industrialized oils. Try to avoid wheat-based flour and products as much as you can. We can make quite a lot of alternatives, flatbreads and so forth, using almond and coconut flours rather than wheat-based flours, and other starchy carbs. We're having lots of success now using things like cauliflower rice to replace rice and couscous and so forth as a base for a dish, or even courgettes grated, or using a spiralizer to replace pasta. You know, those foods in cultural diets often didn't play as big a part in the meal as we've made them play here, or they may have been the main event, but the individual wasn't eating all the other high carb foods that we currently eat in our modern lifestyle. We shouldn't need to snack. We should have main meals, 3, possibly down to 2, if people really find that they get a nice formula for a really satisfying meal. Many of us now regularly only eat 2 meals a day. We actually need long gaps between our meals for our bodies to digest completely and fully utilize the nutrients from the previous meal before we were bombarded again with another meal. We shouldn't need to snack if we're getting it right. The problem we're having when people say, oh, but in such and such a country, they eat rice all the time. They may do, but they don't eat all the other stuff that we're eating. So it's a question of pulling back and looking at what we're eating and getting the balance right. So foods that can be quite useful for people trying to get their carbs right down if they're vegetarians. I think this really repeats a lot of what I've said. Hemp seeds are quite useful, very nutritious and quite high in protein, and they can be ground down as well as eaten as little nutty berries. Lots of resources now that are out there, and I know Panna usually puts the slides onto the WhatsApp group, so you can click onto these links afterwards. I found down here, for people who've been on the group before, I've mentioned the Public Health Collaborations website. Ditch the Carbs is a very useful website with lots of recipes, as is Diet Doctor. Diet Doctor's got a huge amount of really good information on it. But I've also found another site called Keto Mojo, which has got lots of brilliant information on it, but particularly it's got some great information on different aspects of nutrition where you might find a lot of really useful stuff. The Keto Fitness Club has a lot of good information for starters. It's not particularly geared to, you know, the Asian and vegetarian culture, but it's got good basic information and lots of infographics, and it's got a lot of really good recipes, some of which would be suitable for vegetarians. So it's another useful site. There's just lots and lots of good websites out there now. Keto Vegetarian Recipes is one I've come across, as is Nutrition Refined, where you'll get some good veggie type recipes, and particularly for vegans, the link at the bottom has got some good vegan recipes. Just came across one, I think I posted it on this WhatsApp group this week, for some great flatbreads that are made literally just with some coconut flour, a bit of psyllium husk and water, and they were really easy to make and really tasty and light, and they would take the place of a chapati easily, and much less of a problem in terms of carbohydrates. So there are alternatives to the traditional foods. Just got to be prepared to be a bit experimental, but there's lots and lots of information out there now for you all. And I'd just like to remind people that if you are trying to count your carbs and your protein, we don't want people to get obsessed with calories, but what we do want you to do is keep an eye on your protein and your carbohydrate intake. And there's these books are available through Amazon and other booksellers, and they are very useful, but they have a basic Carbs and Cals app, which I have on my phone, and that's really quick and easy to use, because you just find the food and you can put your actual amount in, and it'll tell you what the values are for carbs and fibre and protein, etc. So the books are great, but they're a bit more expensive, whereas the app is about, I think it might be about £4 to buy, but it's incredibly useful to have, to be able to quickly look up a food, and if it's one I'm not familiar with, be able to work out where it fits into my diet. So I'd highly recommend having a look at something like that, to help you to be able to see what your current diet's like and how much maybe you need to change. That's all I wanted to say. I've probably rambled on for far too long, but I hope it's been helpful, and look forward to seeing what questions have come up. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you for that. We've only got one question so far, really. What's the app called that you just mentioned? It's called Carbs and Cals, isn't it?
Yes, the book's called Carbs and Cals. I've gone and put it back on the bookshelf, but it's
the app's called Carbs and Cals.
It's called Carbs and Cals. If you look it up on Amazon, you'll find it. And the accompanying ones now, they've got several, but World Foods I thought was particularly useful because it covers a lot of the Asian cuisine. It's got, you know, as the title suggests, pretty much all around the world, different cuisines, but some of the things that you might not find in the ordinary Carbs and Cals one, you'll find in that World Foods one. But I like the app. Have you got the app?
I've got the app and the first book. I haven't got the World Food book.
Yeah, I got the World Food one because we're doing some work with different cultural diets in Manchester, so I found it would be helpful. But the basic Carbs and Cals is pretty good because it covers all the basic foods, the ingredients that you might use in your dishes. Just ignore the bit at the beginning that's all about calories, because we really feel that you shouldn't be focusing on the calories as such. It's the quality, the nutritional value of the food that is much more important. And if you're watching your carbs and eating healthy fats and adequate protein, you shouldn't overeat. It's quite hard to overeat on fat, that's for sure.
Yeah, so if anybody else has got questions, please put them in the chat. I'd appreciate that. So to answer Nita's question, the app is called Carbs and Cal. You can get it on the App Store or Google Play, or, you know, on the Android. And that's where you'll get the list of all the carb foods, or you can buy the books that Carolyn's just recommended. Jumpa's asking, Greek yogurt, should it be full fat? And is it okay to have a little each day with berries for breakfast?
Absolutely. We definitely go for the full fat. I mean, traditional Greek yogurt is pretty much 10% fat. I know that there are, is it Phage? I never know how to pronounce it, but there's one brand, excuse me, that does a 5%, and that's fine. I mean, that's going to be pretty satisfying. It's very creamy. I have a bit of either. It depends where I'm shopping really as to which one I have, but definitely not the low fat one, because the low fat one will have had stuff added to it to make it palatable. And absolutely, Greek yogurt is a really good breakfast. So, you know, I showed you the traditional cereals and even good old-fashioned porridge, and you know, it is sad people love their porridge, but porridge, I'm afraid, just simply ends up as carbs and sugar in your body. So if you want to substitute something for a cereal breakfast, then Greek yogurt and berries is a great one. And Daxa and I've also got recipes for really nice low carb granolas, and just a spoonful of that and some berries added to the Greek yogurt makes a really good breakfast. So particularly if you're vegan, so you wouldn't be looking at eggs for breakfast, then the Greek yogurt is a great one.
We've got Smita who's saying she uses sunflower oil for preparing curries and was wondering, is there a form of olive oil that is good for preparing?
Okay, well, there's a lot of debate about whether you should cook with olive oil, and I suppose it all depends whether you're really heating stuff at high temperature. And it's not recommended that you heat olive oil to very high temperatures. It's okay for gentle sauteing. And I mean, people that grow up in the Mediterranean tell me they just use olive oil to cook for everything. So I don't know where the truth lies, but because it's very expensive, if you have good quality olive oil, it seems a shame to be sort of blitzing it in a high heat. So avocado oil and coconut oil are good substitutes if you're vegan, but if you eat dairy, then ghee, because ghee's had the lactose, the milk solids taken out of it, so it doesn't burn. So ghee is really good for starting off a curry or anything. I mean, I make an awful lot of soup, and I always start it with sauteing an onion and some celery and stuff, and ghee is great for doing that sort of thing, or anything I'm starting with a bit of frying. So coconut oil, avocado oil and ghee are good ones.
Yeah, I tend to switch around those really, depending on the food I'm making. If I feel ghee is more appropriate, I'll use ghee. It just depends. And just going back to the olive oil, I have heard, I haven't looked at any studies, but that olive oil, because it is so expensive, you when you heat it too high, you're losing the benefits, the nutrition benefits. So it's not necessarily damaging, but you're wasting your money. Because the benefits of olive oil are better when it's either used when it's at low temperatures or just drizzled over food.
And I think I would encourage you, I think we've been so frightened off fat that we kind of worry about using it, but it depends, everybody's tastes are different, but I just love olive oil, and there is nothing nicer than a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil over a salad or whatever. And I use it I make my own mayonnaise. I think you probably do as well, Daxa.
I do.
And so I use a combination of avocado and olive oil for mayonnaise. And you might use olive oil for a sort of vinaigrette type dressing as well. But yeah, I mean, really nice extra virgin olive oil. It is just too nice to cook with. So I suppose, as well as being expensive. So, there are alternatives, but definitely not. Please throw away the sunflower oil.
Yeah, it's very bad for your health, really bad, especially if you reuse it. And I know most Asians reuse their oils when they're deep frying, which each time it's getting worse and worse. And and those kind of oils do lead to cancer when they're heated like that. So
you also get bits left behind, even if you try and filter it, and they get incinerated. Is deep frying a problem? Well, of course, the question that I always like to ask is, what is it you're deep frying? Because it's probably very carby. But if it's just vegetables, well then you want to use an oil that is suitable for high temperatures. And again, avocado and coconut can both withstand fairly high temperatures. So those are the ones we'd recommend. But we would ask the question, what is it you're deep frying? Because maybe you shouldn't be doing it at all.
Well, I'm just curious if Nita wants to come and ask her previous question, because she's asking about a grain called kodri, and I've never heard of it. So, and maybe she wants to explain what that is, and maybe somebody else in the group.
You can unmute yourself if you want to ask us or tell us.
Kodri is actually a broken rice.
Ah, okay.
It's part of rice.
So it is rice, really.
It's really rice,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Carolyn, so if
it's rice, it's
supposed
rice.
to be good compared to rice. What are your views on this?
I can't quite see how. I mean, I don't fully understand the concept of being broken. I mean, once rice is out of its shell, if you like, it's harder coating. It's just starch. It doesn't matter what's been done to it, it's just starch, unfortunately. So I would still think it's not a great thing to be having.
Right. Nita says Google says it's a type of millet similar to barley.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, all of these things are just carbs.
Yeah, they're just grains that always break down into carbohydrates. Also, I noticed on Carolyn, when you gave that list of like 94 names of sugar. sorghum was on there. Now, sorghum is something Indians use, isn't it, Panna?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, oh my gosh, look at that. So that's a grain, and we think as Asians that we probably think sorghum is a healthy grain, and yet it was on that list of sugars. Anyway, digressing. Right, so Bharti says, I make ghee and yogurt at home and gone on gluten-free diet. So well done,
Excellent.
Bharti.
Excellent.
But can I ask, when you say gluten-free
Yes.
diet, what do you mean by that, please? You can unmute and answer.
Yes, gluten-free. I eat millet, and jowar lot, bajri lot, ragi flour, and coconut flour, almond oil, almond flour. I make all the chapatis from that, and trying to cut down gluten as much as I can.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth, actually, because it's a very good point that the almond flour and the coconut flour I like, that's fine. But it's a mistake to think that if something is simply gluten-free, that it will be healthy in terms of a low carb, because all it might mean is that they've managed to remove the gluten, but it's still a grain, or it's still made with a kind of flour that's a wheat-based flour. So you need to check what the ingredients are. And again, you can check the carb content.
Sorry, excuse me. Muted myself.
Check the packaging, because they have these whole sections now in the shops, don't they, of gluten-free stuff or free from. But if you check the packaging for most of them, the carb content is really high.
Sorry, since I cut down the gluten and I eat these grains, millet and everything, my cholesterol level is dropped from 8 to 5.
That's excellent, and that's suiting you. But it's better than eating the gluten products.
Yeah.
But just I would be wary of the millet and the things that are still wheat based. And go for more of the almond and coconut.
Yeah, thing is, I do a lot of exercises, and I need energy. So this food gives me energy to.
Do you need to lose weight?
No, I'm not fat person, but I do a lot of exercises.
Yeah, you will get your energy from increasing the amount of healthy fat you have.
Yeah.
We do not need carbohydrates to give us energy. Our body can create energy from other nutritious food. So it's, again, the way we've been brainwashed by the food manufacturers to think we need these energy giving foods. Our body's very clever. Our ancestors didn't have all these products, but they survived because the body can create energy from fat and protein. So please don't think you have to have wheat-based products, or please carry on experimenting with your almond flour and your coconut flour. But if you want the full health benefits, you need to leave the more grain-based ones out.
But Bharti, when I saw earlier, you had lost quite a lot of weight since you joined us.
Yes, I have.
Well, that's good. Excellent.
Put your video on.
Okay.
Can you put your video on, please? Because I saw you earlier. You'd lost quite a lot of weight.
Oh, you're in the dark.
Yeah, it's because the light's behind you, so it looks like you're in the dark.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing.
Fantastic.
Very, very well. But if you find that your weight has sort of like stagnated, or your health is stagnated, as in it's not improving, then you can make those smaller, slightly, make some more adjustments to those grains.
But no, you've done really well, and it's particularly good news that your cholesterol has responded. So that's great news. So you're very much doing the right things, but there are other tweaks you could make.
Caroline, things I eat, I just read my stomach. It's funny to say, but when I eat, I feel what I'm digesting, and I'm not I read my body, scan my body whether this is good for me or not.
Yeah. I think I understand what you're saying, and that's a really important thing that we do need to do, is we do need to listen to our bodies. And I think we've kind of become disconnected from thinking about the food having an overall effect. I think we just think about food. We need food because we're hungry, rather than thinking we need food to fuel our bodies, and we're not really thoughtful about how does this food affect me. And if you're having a bad day, you don't feel as full of energy and as good as you'd like to feel, then have a think about what you've been eating over the previous 24 hours, and also what you've been doing. Have you been very stressed, or have you not had a good night's sleep? Because I think we just don't value our bodies as much as we should, and treat them as well as we should. We expect them to keep on going for us, but as I say, we look after things that we paid a lot of money for, such as cars and other gadgets these days. We look after them better than we do our bodies. So hopefully it's sounding like quite a few of you are getting on the right track, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's really good, and every positive change in the right direction is is excellent, and you should be proud of yourselves. And then we've got Nita's asking, if you don't need to lose weight, then how many carbs would you recommend to have?
Well, I'll let Daxa answer this one as well, but my attitude there would be not so much about focusing on how many carbs, but I would still focus on what I'm eating in terms of, when I look at a plate of food, where's the balance? And I'd want more protein accompanied by healthy fat, with the carbs as very much an afterthought. And most of the carbs coming from healthy sources such as vegetables. Excuse me. What do you think, Daxa?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if you're eating some carrots and, parsnips and some other root vegetables, not lots of root vegetables, or even like pumpkins and swede, you're going to get some carbs through eating those foods. And they're nourishing, and they have so many more nutrients in them. They vary in color, whereas when you eat grains, as Carolyn's slide showed, in those 20 calories, and you have the 4 plates,
20 grams of carbs. Sorry.
20 grams of carbs in those 4 plates, compared to the other 4 plates that were colorful, and there was just so much more. Well, there was just so much more food on the plates, and you can imagine how that is better for your bodies and your immunity even. Yes,
because I think what I was trying to really get across tonight is I was asked to focus on 2 particular sort of medical conditions, if you like. Well, not medical, because menopause isn't a medical condition, it's just part of life, but focusing on those areas. But the way that Daxa and I would encourage people to approach food is as a nutritious fuel for the body. And therefore you want your meals, whether you need to lose weight or not, what you eat matters, because you don't know what else is going on inside your body. And all the organs are affected by a bad diet, and carbohydrates put a stress on the body in terms of this insulin peak and drop and so forth. If you are taking on board, you only have 5 grams of sugar floating around in your blood at any one time. So when you eat more than that, your body's got to get rid of it. It's either got to get it into the cells, the muscles, or stored away. And it gets stored as fat if we eat it in excess. So all of that is taking up body time and energy that could be better used repairing and restoring your vital functions. So I say to people, this isn't just about weight loss, this is about health, and it's focusing on every meal being nutritious for you, rather than, I don't need to worry because I don't need to lose weight. We should still all be paying attention to the nutrients in our food, and there are very few nutrients in carb dense foods, whereas protein sources and leafy vegetables and so forth, and that's just right, some of the root vegetables, so you can afford to have more of those than somebody who does need to lose weight. But that's where I'd be going for my carbs, as opposed to I can have that bread or that cake because I don't need to lose weight. Hope that makes sense.
a similar question to before, what oil is best for frying?
Same as we've said, you know, your ghee, if you eat dairy, otherwise your coconut and avocado oil are the two better vegetarian options. And say keep your olive oil for dressings and so forth.
Can I add also that nutrition and nourishment is also very important for our brain health, and fat is very important for our brains. You know, we know how many more cases are of Alzheimer's than maybe there were when you were young. You know, if you think about your grandparents, they never lost their memories. You know, they were sharp. You know, and
yeah, I quite agree. You know, they're talking now about Alzheimer's being possibly called diabetes type 3 because they see a similar connection to this metabolic syndrome, which is the result of, you know, all that we've been talking about tonight, poor nutrition, and causing damage to the brain. And there are, again, just as we're talking about menopause and cancer, there's work looking at ketogenic diets being really helpful at stopping or even in some cases improving Alzheimer's in individuals. But certainly they talk about there being an epidemic of Alzheimer's, just as they talk about an epidemic of diabetes, and they're all coming from the same cause. The fact that over the last 4 decades, our diets have really deteriorated in terms of quality of nutrition and emphasis on carbs and less, you know, putting us off and frightening us off fat. So hence we've been eating all these industrialized products rather than the healthy things that Mother Nature has given us. So yeah, I mean, the brain is part of the body, and indeed the microbiome, which I referred to earlier, which is something I suppose we could do a whole session on. They now realize how important gut health is for brain health as well as the whole body, and it all comes back to what we're eating. So eat real food is our mantra. So things that have grown, that I was going to say have a face on, but that's not good if it's a lot of vegetarians, but things that have grown in nature as opposed to being made in a factory are what we should be eating. Trust Mother Nature. She generally knows best.
Yeah, there's a question that says, have I digested it right in saying sunflower oil we must not use? So yes, please do not use sunflower oil.
Absolutely.
But then it says, please, can you clarify to me on this, as that's what I was using all the time for deep frying our puris. Do you know what puris are, Carolyn? They're like chapatis, but they're deep fried. They're little smaller.
Sound gorgeous, but bad. Yeah, so number one, we don't want you having much in the way of puris, but number two, sunflower oil, no. And I know you've been encouraged by all sorts of sources to use it, but it is just bad. It's made through really industrialized means. I mean, sunflowers don't have oil. They have seeds that have to be crushed, and then they have to be refined by using all sorts of chemicals and things to get the oil. And the end result is something that's very inflammatory. And actually, it's quite funny because today I was driving over to a meeting with a practice that wants us to help them with some of these lifestyle courses. I passed this big juggernaut pulling out McDonald's, and it had on the side of it, we recycle all our oil for fuel. Now that made me howl, because that's where sunflower oil and the likes came from in the first place. It was back at the beginning of the 20th century when the scientists were trying to find sources of fuel, and they found these seed oils and so forth, but actually they weren't terribly effective as fuels for machinery. So some bright spark had the idea of putting them into the food chain. So there's McDonald's busy boasting that they're putting them back now into other sources of fuel, but that's, in my opinion, where they should have been in the first place. They've got no right being in a human body at all. So please, any of you that've got any of those vegetable stroke sunflower oils in your kitchens. Please get rid of them. Rapeseed oil is, if it's cold pressed, it's not too bad, but rapeseed oil has a different balance of the omegas, and omega-3 is really good for us, omega-6 is not so great. Rapeseed's balance is not as good as the other oils we've mentioned, such as avocado, coconut, or the olive oil. Any seed oil, I mean, I don't know what you think about groundnut, but cottonseed oil, most seed oils, in order to get the oil, they've got to go through this processing. So with avocados and coconuts, they actually press the fruit, especially if it's the virgin oils. So it's literally is just the oil that they've got from simple pressing techniques. Whereas anything that's got from a nut or a seed is going to be, they've had to use industrial processes to get it.
Yeah.
No, vegetable oil, no. Vegetable oil, sunflower oil, all of those, no. Vegetables don't have oil in them, do they? So it's just the marketing that went alongside the idea that fat was bad for us, unfortunately, has got this notion that these things are healthy. And it's not your fault at all. It's the way they've been marketed and pushed at us. But they just, there's lots and lots of evidence coming through now how inflammatory they are and how bad they are for our bodies. So please try and replace them.
I'm just going to share a blog article to our WhatsApp group about oils.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's called Healthy Fats, What You Need to Know.
I think that would be useful.
Okay.
Crisp and dry rapeseed oil. I've just answered this one, Panna. I don't know enough about. Have a look. You can usually tell on most of these oils labels, because I think they are duty bound to tell you. Because as I said earlier, watch your olive oils, because some of them are refined. They're not virgin olive oils, but it should tell you on the side of the label how that oil has been achieved and whether it's been a refined process. If it says refined, stay away from it.
I think we shall call it a day.
Yeah.
What is going to be our next subject? Anybody's request? They're all quiet.
Yeah. Any of the new people, anything you particularly like us to cover?
Nilaben, we can't hear you. Gluten-free chat.
High in omega-3 knee problem. I don't know if I can be very specific about knee problems. I have to tell you that if you can get onto the whole way that we've been trying to encourage you to think about eating the nutrient dense foods and keeping the carbohydrates to a minimum, they have been shown to be very anti-inflammatory and therefore help with arthritis, including knee problems. I'm not saying it's a panacea, but a lot of people have found a great benefit in most inflammatory conditions by getting onto a low carbohydrate diet. So hopefully if you've taken on board what we've been talking about and try and make some changes, you will see improvements. Well, shall we give people a few days to maybe have a think about it and put onto the WhatsApp group any topics that they'd like covered? And if not, Daxa and I'll get our heads together and think about something.
Yeah.
I mean, Daxa has suggested we might want to talk about thyroid function. And also there is the microbiome. There's got a lot of interesting stuff on microbiome we could talk about.
Absolutely.
Health. Yeah. So please think about it and put ideas on the WhatsApp, and if not, we'll come up with something and we'll let Panna know so she can put it on the meeting information. So we need to pick a date, don't we?
14th.
Yeah, go back to Tuesday if that's all right. I can probably
Oh,
do. Yeah, I can do
let me just check. Oh yeah, I can do the 14th in the evening.
Yeah.
You-
Do we do
Brilliant.
that one then?
Yeah.
14.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, all the participants who joined us, and thank you, Caroline and Daxa, for putting your time in to discuss all these interesting things. And
No problem.
And thanks to you for hosting.
Yes, thanks as always, Panna. You put in a lot of work.
Yes. Thank you.
okay. And also, I'd like to remind you, ladies, that we've got Ekadasi on Friday. So try and join in our Ekadasi on Zoom. And then obviously Friday afternoon, we have yoga, which would help your body as well. And then yoga Saturday morning as well. And that is 1.5 hours with Nina Ben. And then we've got Zumba on Mondays. So try and join our Zumba as well, which is very good for your body.
Absolutely.
And yeah, we need all these things for our body. And if we don't work at it, it's not going to help us. And like Caroline and Daksha said, when you're looking at a plate, you ask yourself, do I need to eat this? Is my stomach asking for the food? And I'm doing that now. Do I need it? Is my stomach hungry? If it's not, I'm not bothering to eat. But just to keep my mind happy that I have eaten something, I'll eat a little bit. But I do question myself saying, do I need it? That's what Daksha and Caroline's motto is. And that's how you need to lose weight. And this is by eating real food and not just junk food.
Yeah.
So we have covered stress, diabetes. Oh, well, no, diabetes, I'm going to organize a date for, which is the 30th of September. And that is to reverse your diabetes. That talk is going to come on the 30th of September. And we've also got a cancer talk, and that is on the 15th, the prostate cancer. So whoever is interested in prostate cancer, that's coming on the 15th of September. So please look out for the link. And also, if somebody is interested in astrological, I've got this guy coming from India, and he just look at your face and he will tell you whatever you want to know. So that is going to be hopefully this weekend. So I'll put out the link. So look out for that link as well. It's quite fun when somebody tells you just by reading your face and you're saying, is it all bullshit?
I like the way you don't mince your words there.
No, you need to believe yourself. Whether if he's saying the truth, reading your face, then probably he's right what he's telling you. So it is one way of finding out. So try and join in to see that as well. So once again, thank you very much, all the ladies and gentlemen who've joined in. I really appreciate it. Lots of people joined in today in our group, but could not manage to join in as well. But to let you know, yes, we do record on YouTube, and it's more fun to be at the session live than watching it on Zoom. Because on Zoom, watching on YouTube, because on Zoom, you can actually question us and, we can answer straight away. But on YouTube, you're just listening and watching like a movie, which is not fun. I'll fall asleep, to be honest. But to be on the Zoom, you are alert, you can ask questions, and we can answer them straight away. So try and convince yourself to attend Zoom sessions more than watching on YouTube. That's my motto as well.
I agree.
Because going on the YouTube, you're just looking like watching a movie, and you're trying to think now, what the hell is she talking about?
Yeah.
That's not right. So I would advise you to, all join in our sessions instead of just watching on YouTube. You're missing out the main points, and you're also missing out the things what you need to know more. So thank you very much again, ladies and gentlemen. We shall catch up on the 14th, and also try and join our other links of events and join in them and enjoy them. Have a lovely weekend.
Thanks, Panna.
And see you again all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all
Bye.
from Women to Women. Good night all.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank you,
Bye.
Panna Ben and Caroline. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Panna. Thank you,
Panna.
Caroline. It was a
Thank
good session, lot of good information we got it today, yes.
Thank
Great.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Panna.
Thank you. Champa Masi, all right, sir?
હા મજા
I know.
આવી મને પણ.
Very
Maja.
important.
You're always jotting things down.
Yeah.
Thank you, Panna Ben.
You're welcome all.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Panna Ben.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Nita Ben.
Good night. Thank you.
I only wish everybody
Right.
would join in, and also show their faces. Not everybody shows their face, so we don't know who we're talking to. But it really is nice. Thank you all for joining in.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Nita Ben. Take care.
Bye, Panna.
Bye. Oh, Nita Ben, કાલે આરતી કરવી છે તમારે? આરતી, અંજલિ.
I can do it, Panna, if nobody
Yeah.
is there. I'll do it if nobody is there.
Okay, which one do you want? Aarti ke
Anjali, anything you say.
anything?
Whatever. Yeah, you
Okay.
WhatsApp me so I'll know what I have to say.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you, Nima Ben. Thank you. Champa Masi, take care. You're looking lovely.
હા બેટા. Oh, thank you.
Take care all. Catch you up.
Okay, okay.
Take
Love
care.
to all of your family
Thank you.
as well.
I will. Thank you. Take care.
Hi, Panna Ben. Can you send me the YouTube link for this program? Rekha Ben said I can, but I couldn't find it. You know, Rekha Ben Crawford just messaged me regarding this because I joined in the diabetic LCNL today. So do you hear me?
It's going to be on YouTube. You can watch later.
Or later, not now.
I don't know. Panna knows.
Yeah, because I messaged about half an hour ago. હું છે ને LCN diabetes માં join થઈ હતી, so I couldn't do both at one time. So she said I can watch on a YouTube, but I can't
Anytime
find.
you can watch it on. If it's on YouTube, you can watch it anytime.
Yeah, but I don't have a link.
That you'll get it. I think you'll get it. I think.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Because-
Sadhana.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
night.
Thank you, Panna Ben. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, where did I go? Where did I miss the leave?
got back from India, and I didn't shake any hands there, and it was very easy because they go like this. Namaste, 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 India. Namaste, 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 India. I tell you, just avoid shaking hands as I do. You can try to implement the Indian system of Namaste. पूरी दुनिया आजकल नमस्ते की आदत डाल रही है. अगर किसी कारण से हमने ये आदत छोड़ दी है, तो हम भी हाथ मिलाने के बजाय इस आदत को फिर से डालने का भी मैं समझता ये उत्तम समय है. नमस्ते करके एक दूसरे को ट्रीट करना चाहिए.